channel are you on? I'm like, ah. Okay. Um,
Aw.
I just now, for the first time in maybe 3 months, closed all of my browser tabs except
Oh,
one.
oh,
Yeah, I think
congratulations.
I have that feeling too. I think I have like way more open than I honestly should at this point.
That's the ADHD for me. I just closed my brain essentially when I closed all those tabs. How am I ever going to find all that information again?
I wish I could give you answers.
Right.
Yeah, I can't organize, so I just rely completely on my memory. And it often works. I do have a good memory, but uh, I can't understand time, so I'm always, like when you asked me about a schedule 2 days ago or yesterday, maybe even, I was like, it's not until Thursday. Why is she asking me right now? And I'm like, oh, what day is this? I have to wonder several times a day what season we're in. Like,
For
it's
anybody joining us, this is the awkward banter portion of
Right. Love awkward.
just some people
yeah.
are like, what is this is not Matthew. I did not come here for this. Like
We're
Awkward
all
is I
here
love
now,
awkward.
so we could start. Like, is this autistic time where some people were angry that we were like 30 seconds over, and some people will be here in like 30 minutes, and that's
okay, so is it Neuroclassics Facebook page?
yes.
Okay.
yes, and Twitter.
Oh.
I'm trusting Raya because
I see the
Okay.
link on Twitter.
I'm like, it says it's live. It better be. Like
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on Facebook.
I'm sure the reporting of this would be hilarious.
Okay.
okay, so as we'll just kind of we're trying to help people find their way in. They social media works that way. People are like, oh, I didn't know you were doing a Zoom. So we're having our awkward banter. Yes, awkward banter moments. But I will go ahead and start, and we'll take it slow at the beginning so people can file in.
yes.
Um,
I also want to quickly say thank you to Katie. She is our captionist, and yes, I'm just giving thanks for that.
yes, thank you,
Thank
Katie.
her for me too. Solid.
So we have today Raya in the top corner there. Feels like the Brady Bunch, kind of. Who is kind of manning the tech end of things. And Laverne is Matthew's mom. She's trying to get help everybody trying to find their way to the streams. Cheyenne, Jules, Arola, Sean, and Emmanuel. Emmanuel is here to help field questions after each person speaks, or during. If you have a question, you can. Sorry. If you have a question, you can just type it on social media in response to the stream or in the Zoom chat. And I believe I'm trusting that we will be able to find those questions and direct them to the speakers. So,
Ooh, do we have any? Oh gosh, did we have any more speakers?
no, this is everybody.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
You gotta ask these questions.
So, if you don't, it would be great if you could open the chat and just.
Yay! I'm being told by Lee Fry that it's working on Facebook. Thank
Yes,
you.
it is. I've got it on Facebook.
Can Lee? Well, I want to add. Like, yeah. Can you hear us, Lee? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can hear it.
So I was looking to make sure. Gotta run all the tests. The captions
Okay.
are running.
We're recording too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
It's being
All right.
heard. That makes me happy.
And Joey says that I am cutting out. Can everybody else hear me okay?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
I can hear you great.
Okay.
Is Joey
Hopefully-
in Zoom or?
Yes.
Okay.
In the
all right.
Zoom chat.
I gotta ask these questions. I'm sorry.
I mean, at least you know in real time.
Y'all. Continue.
Okay. We will start with Laverne. Laverne was just in Atlanta. A lot has happened since last week's Zoom and today. And I would like to ask you, Laverne, can you tell us about why you went to Atlanta and what's going on right now?
So I had an awesome visit, and I mean, I'm still at awe getting over it. I had an awesome visit with Culture City's founder, Dr. Julian Maha, and Dominique Wilkins and Coach Pierce. We had a conversation and interview in regards to Matthew, where I presented, Matthew's case. I actually had a binder, and I presented this entire binder with all of Matthew's documents, and just to kind of go over, the warrants and his medical history, letters to the governors from different entities such as the crash experts, the psychologists, neurologists, and whoever else. And I had a couple of the court transcripts also, just in case anybody had any questions. I had those to present to them. Culture City is actually partnering up with us, or leading the way, as you may say, to helping bring Matthew home from this injustice, undoing what was wrong in the first place when he was supposed to be taken to the hospital at the accident. And so it was a great meeting and interview. Yeah, and I'm still at awe. I'm still kind of getting over it. Today was a kind of good recovery for me to say, wow, this is actually happening. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
And that's exciting. We have some other very exciting things on the horizon too.
Yes.
That
And I'll let Sean go into it more.
Yeah. So Sean is from Culture City, and Sean, can you tell us a little bit about what the nonprofit Culture City is and how or why you got involved in Matthew's case?
Sure. So, my name is Sean Koken, as you just heard. I am an autistic individual, and I'm also on the board of Culture City. I got involved in Culture City because they invested in me as a person. They essentially saw potential in me as somebody who could help not only put to words certain aspects of what it's like to be on the autism spectrum, but to also allow for other people to come forward with their stories and have people be more comfortable talking to a large charity group about the difficulties of being on the spectrum. So the reason why we're very interested in Matthew's case, or rather I should say why I'm interested in Matthew's case, is because in a very similar way to him, I had this mindset when growing up that there was something weird about me that I didn't understand, and I heard this word autism thrown around me, but I didn't want to deal with it. I thought that if I just force it out of my head and just don't think about it. It just won't impact me anymore. And the change in life for me happened around college age, when I hit massive levels of depression and I started hitting massive anxiety attacks that I didn't quite understand. That the symptoms of autism that I was experiencing were things that I haven't experienced before since I was a child. So to try to rationalize what was going on with me took me months, if not years, to come to terms with the fact that, yes, it's autism, it's an anxiety attack. These things are normal, and you don't have to be ashamed of who you are, because there's very positive aspects of being on the autism spectrum and very positive qualities that I love about myself. But that transition is a long and difficult one. And in Matthew's case, I can't imagine what it's like to literally in an instant have to immediately start dealing with those larger questions, explaining to people who aren't on the spectrum what's going on with them, what's going on with Matthew, while he himself is trying to figure out what's going on with him. It takes a lot of introspection, and I applaud Matthew's courage going through this entire court case, going through the interrogation, going through everything. He really showed some courage that I'm not sure most people would be capable of, especially those on the autism spectrum and things like that. So Culture City made this a priority to get involved in this case. We try to open up the world for people with invisible disabilities. We started simply with making large public areas sensory inclusive for people that felt excluded from large public places. But we've really been expanding more now into civil rights of people with invisible disabilities to try to help people like Matthew, because it's so important. And I just want to say it's so nice to have you here, Laverne, talking with you. And I'm so glad you had a positive experience with Dr. Julian Maha and Dominique. I'm so glad we can make you feel some hope and know that no matter what happens, we have your back.
Thank you. Thank you. And, it's ironic when we were doing the interview, and as Coach Pierce asked, how's Matthew doing? And I began telling him, kind of what Matthew's going through. The phone rang, and it was Matthew. And not to give the whole interview away, but they were able to actually have a conversation, about a 10-minute conversation with Matthew while I was there. So that was, that gave Matthew some hope. Because when I had spoken to him this morning, his demeanor, you can hear, he's got that hope in his voice. So yes, absolutely exciting.
I'm so glad that we have the ability to assist in that. It really means so much to me as well that this case is Culture City's first real step towards civil rights for people with what we call invisible disabilities, because we don't want to discriminate between autism, PTSD, and other forms of invisible disabilities. We want to be there for all of them. And to have a case for someone that reminds me of myself really means a lot, and we're going to do everything that we can.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Sean. And I have been so impressed. Usually when I see a nonprofit organization that works in some way with autistic people, but it's not part of the autistic communities, we kind of have a silo of a few organizations that everyone knows. I hadn't heard of Culture City, and I'm looking, and they have like STEM toys. They help businesses to become sensory friendly and maintain that environment. They have the coolest like mobile sensory unit. It's kind of like a party bus.
Yeah, the safe vehicles.
Yeah,
they travel all over the world. That's what Colton was telling us.
Oh yes, you've talked with Colton. He's fantastic.
Yes.
But I'll elaborate a little more on what Culture City is. I don't want to take the story away from Matthew in any regards, but I feel like there's going to be some questions, so I'll address them as fast as I can. Culture City, the reason why I got involved was because I was starting to get empowered in self-advocacy towards the end of my college years. And there were a few charities that I was doing some speaking for. And Culture City opened up a sensory room on my college campus to allow autistic students to feel comfortable participating in events on campus. And like you guys, I was a little unsure of them at first, you know. You never really know what the intention of people coming in and making a big donation, what they really are. But the head of Culture City, Dr. Julian Maha, he walked into the middle of the sensory room, looked around. He didn't know that I was looking or anything, and he elbowed somebody next to him and said, you know, it'd be really cool if we got student art on the walls. And I thought to myself, this guy gets it. The Culture City logo was not on the walls in the room at all. It was written on a little whiteboard outside that you could just wipe away immediately, and you'd never know where it came from. And instead of thinking, let's put my name on it, let's put Culture City's face on it, his thought was, let's get student art on the walls so it's theirs. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, I'm in. Wherever this group is going, I want to be able to help out, and I want to be in. So that ambition is what really drives us. We want to see systemic change for people on the autism spectrum autistic people, I apologize. And we want to grow, and we want to learn, and we want to be a part of this larger community that just brings so much positivity to the world and could really use our help.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. So Tara,
Sean, I had a question. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Laverne. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, Sean, hi. My name is Emmanuel, and you know, I'm autistic. I'm autistic and Black, and I just want to say I really appreciate you and your organization reaching out to help. It means a lot, and any visibility that you guys provided really would go a long way. So, you know, thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, for me, I've been working with Culture City for around 2 years. So as a relatively young autistic individual, to be a part of a board like this, a board of influential people that could also be able to speak for the rights of other individuals is massive to me personally. And I want to make sure that power is used properly. I want to make sure that we don't waste our opportunity of not just awareness, but also inclusion. We want to make sure that we're more than just a name. We're more than just feel-good vibes. That we're actually living up to the promise of making a better world for people on the autism spectrum, but also with conditions like PTSD, dementia, and many others that have these invisible, that are not clearly visible in the face of an individual that has it. So I'm glad that we're able to make you feel that way, Emmanuel, and we're always open to have as many people be a part of us as possible.
All right.
Thank you so much. And I'm back. I had to go say goodnight. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Who answers the Q&A question? Up at the top, because there's like one who...
Okay, so usually we, I mean, it makes sense to ask questions of the people who have most recently spoken, but, you know, if it's...
No, there wasn't any, I didn't see any for Sean. I only saw like the two Q&A up at the... I see only the two Q&A up at the top. I mean, I'm looking...
Oh, someone asked, why is Matthew serving time for an accident? Why 50 years? I know about your minimum, but still.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I can answer that if anyone else. So Matthew's serving a 50-year sentence for the two malicious wounding and the hit and run. So two malicious wounding equals 40 years, and then the hit and run equals the 10 years. So 40 of it was suspended, and that's why it was a 10-year sentence. That's actually above the state guidelines. So they knew that they basically railroaded Matthew from the very beginning with the accident. They charged him with second-degree attempted murder for non-fatal car accident, for turning a car accident into a crime from the beginning, which they had no intent. That's why it was dropped during pretrial. But prior to pretrial, they hit him with two aggravated malicious wounding charge. And so aggravated malicious wounding, each of them would have been 20 years to life. So that's where the plea deal came into play. That's why his lawyer manipulated him into taking a lesser charge, which was the malicious wounding. So that's where the 50 years came into play. We went into what would have been the trial, but it wasn't really the trial. It was Matthew answering the questions to the judge. But as everybody knows, an autistic person, individual, when he knew the back of his head that I'm manipulated to believe that he was coming home, he then said, yes, I'm going to take, yes, I plead guilty, because he's not thinking about the questions, and he wasn't thinking about the answers. He was thinking about, I'm answering these questions to go home. And so again, when we got to sentencing, which was a couple months after the trial hearing, the Commonwealth of Virginia basically asked for the maximum of each charge, and the maximum of each charge was 20 years, 20, 20, and then 10. But again, above state guidelines for anything. It was not a crime, it was an accident. And so I threw my hand up in the air and I said, you know what? I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I'm not going to, I need help. Matthew needs help. We were bullied into silence from the beginning. We were told if we went to the media or we sought out help, that Matthew would suffer a worser consequence. And so here I am, almost 9 months into after sentencing, and we're making strides. And I'm glad that I brought it out to the public, because many of these cases go unheard because parents like us, we don't know what is out there, what help is out there for us. And so because we don't know what's out there for us, we just sit back and kind of say, oh my gosh. And a lot of parents actually let their kids become statistics in this. And I'm a fighter. Through my battling cancer, I am not. I'm fighting for my life, and I'm fighting for my son's life. And if I'm fighting for my life, I'm not going to give up on him. I'm fighting for 2 lives here, and I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up.
Thank you, Laverne. So I talked to Matthew about the plea deal and what happened, what did his lawyer tell him, and why he accepted it. And he said that this lawyer told Laverne a ton of times that she was not going to bring race into the discussion and wouldn't believe that race factored in. But she told Matthew that if it went to trial, a jury would take one look at him and just hear the summary of the case and decide he was guilty. And I mean, if you take one look at someone and decide they're guilty, I think she was acknowledging that race was a factor at that point. So it's really there's so much injustice. And one thing I wanted to say about what Sean said, when he was saying that Matthew had to just process all of the things about realizing he's autistic and what that means in the moment, or not being able to when he had to. The night of the accident, the police asked him what his diagnoses were, if he had any, and he told them he had anxiety, but not anxiety attacks, and he had a diagnosis of Asperger's and ADHD, but he didn't know if he had those anymore. So that's how little Matthew understood about, being autistic. There's an essay that Laverne put out a long time ago that Matthew wrote about how he was awkward as a child and quiet, and he had difficulty making friends, and he always said the wrong thing. But he had come to love himself, and it was kind of I've overcome my autism, or my Asperger's essay, which Asperger's and autism are the same thing. It's just an archaic word for autism. It's all the same. But so he had that little understanding. He thought it was something that he overcame, just challenges. And he talked about all the things that he loved about himself. His ability to see patterns. He talked about his honesty and authenticity, how he thinks deeply about things, how he's really open and non-judgmental. All of those things are being autistic. It's not just challenges to overcome. But Matthew really needed to, it would have helped him a lot if he had better understanding. The mainstream world talks about autism like it's a disease, a separate thing from us that we have to, just overcome a set of obstacles instead of as our core self. And so when we find ourselves in a situation where things are going better, or we're not currently experiencing the obstacles, if that's all we think autism is, then we don't really realize what it means to be autistic. It would have helped Matthew a lot to be prepared by understanding. He had self-acceptance as a human. He knew he was different. He talked about it all the time. He wrote poems about it. All of his poetry just characterizes being autistic. It's amazing. It's beautiful. So that is that's what Sean was referencing when he talked about that. Go ahead, Sean.
Sure. I mean, I think a huge part of being autistic is that level of introspection that you really need. It pushes you into that mindset, at least for me mentally. I don't want to speak for the entire autism spectrum, and please stop me if it sounds like I am. But from my experience on the autism spectrum, you have to have that deep level of introspection to understand yourself, to understand, okay, I'm different than everybody else. Why? Why am I different than everybody? Is there anything wrong with being different than everybody? And it's absolutely a challenge. And initially, because as a child, you're in the same environment every day, over and over and over again, you think you're just getting better, you're getting over autism, which in my experience doesn't seem to be true. That your quote-unquote symptoms can pop up by many things, including stress and change in environment and all sorts of other things. So it's less about overcoming autism, and it's more about learning to live with it. It's learning to love yourself, including everything with autism. there is no good side or bad side of autism. It just is. It just flat out is. And you get to decide what aspects for yourself you get to love about him. And it sounds like Matthew was really making fantastic strides in that regard. It maybe just one or so shift in thinking and coming to terms with that aspect that he loved about himself was autism, is something that he was right on the cusp of, and he could still definitely achieve. And that's why we want to ensure that Matthew has the most resources available, especially through this extremely difficult time.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to shift now to a different topic. We have a few things lined up, and when we have an autistic neuroscientist here, Arola, which I'm very excited about. She's going to be breaking down some of the details of this case with science. If you followed the website, we had a forensic physicist who deconstructed. He's a crash. I forgot the title. Forensic engineer, and so he deconstructed. Oh, go ahead, Laverne.
Forensic crash engineer.
Yeah, forensic crash specialist. Anyway, he deconstructed using physics and fluid mechanics and the data from the chip in the car. They call it the black box that records the last few seconds from both vehicles. And he kind of reconstructed what happened using the GPS coordinates and maps and police reports. And he was essentially able to exonerate Matthew. He said, yes, Matthew was going very fast when he drove into the wrong lane, but his actions indicate that he was trying to not hit another car. He was hugging the curb. He was trying to turn away and not towards. And had he intended to do this, he wouldn't have done it the way he did. He would have hit someone head on, but he hit them corner to corner. He ran out of turn lane. So that's what happened. He was trying to hug the curb and get up into the grass, and he couldn't. So we are going to now talk about how science can just be the, you probably hear my cat in the background. Science can be the great equalizer. There is no bias. There's no room for bias or racism with just hard science. And so if science were more accessible, then bias would not be allowed to carry such a heavy weight in the courtroom. The prosecutors acted on the role of medical doctor, autism expert, neurologist, psychologist, and quite frankly, psychic. They mostly acted like psychics, and they just presumed, everything about Matthew and what he was thinking, and said it as if it were fact. And so we're going to look at some things from a neuroscience angle. And so please don't be intimidated by the neuroscience. But Arola, I wanted to bring up biases have repeatedly in the United States been proven to most negatively affect Black and disabled men when it comes to the justice system. Can you introduce yourself and then teach us a little bit about the neuroscience of bias and why you think the Commonwealth attorney characterized Matthew as malicious and calculated, or maybe why strangers saw Matthew flailing his arms and confused and touching his face and fidgeting, and that prompted them to restrain him? What were they thinking?
Okay, so you want me to introduce myself and then talk about biases?
Yes, please.
Okay. So my name's Arula, and I am autistic, and I currently study biology and neuroscience at Carnegie Mellon, and I'll be, as an undergrad, so yeah, I'll be discussing, I guess, the science and trying to debunk some of the pseudoscience about Matthew's case tonight. And I guess I have 3 mini things that I can talk about prepared, 2 with visuals and 1 without. I was hoping to get all 3 with visuals, but it was a lot. And so I hope you all try to pay attention to these, and hopefully I will be able to explain them to you, even if you don't know what a neuron is. Right now, Matthew's being unfairly imprisoned, and I think lack of scientific literacy led to some pseudoscience being thought of as true, which contributed to him being unfairly imprisoned. And so I'm trying to hope I can get scientists in the audience to care about Matthew's case, and general audience members to care about the science of Matthew's case, so that if any bullshit is brought up in the courtroom again, you can kind of identify it and think about it critically and call it out effectively. So hopefully by the end of today, we can all go forward with the relevant science needed to educate others in the full injustices of Matthew's case and prevent similar things from happening in others' cases too. That being said, it's a very ambitious goal, and I don't know if I was able to meet it, so just full disclaimer. And if I get anything wrong and if anyone in the audience knows the correct answer, please do not hesitate to correct me, because my goal is for everyone to have the most accurate information possible, and I am just an undergraduate student, so I might make mistakes. So I guess I'll start by talking about implicit biases. And so I guess so what do you think it takes to make an instinctive automatic decision, one that you're able to make without your conscious awareness? Well, it requires observation of your surroundings in any given situation, as well as enough past experience and knowledge for you to be able to make a prediction of the likely outcomes that might happen in a situation based on any of your potential actions. So this is what your brain does. In any given situation, there will be a best case scenario, the best possible outcome for you when you leave that situation. And your brain is constantly trying to reach for this best case scenario, even though it does not know what this best case scenario is. And the way it does this is by combining something called a likelihood function and something called a prior probability distribution. And these are based on things you either observe in your surroundings or based on beliefs that you develop through your past experiences and memories, respectively. Ultimately, your brain is trying to figure out the probability that an action you take will result in the best case scenario, and trying to make a good decision based on a hypothesis. For the prior probability distribution, your brain creates an estimate that your hypothesis will be correct, and this only relies on the past experiences that you've had and does not rely on new sensory information. For the likelihood function, it determines whether the specific set of sensory information in your surroundings is a good set of information for you to proceed with your hypothesis, to take the action or not. By combining these 2 things, beliefs you developed from your past experiences, as well as new information from a situation, your brain has enough to decide what action to take in order to get as close as possible to that best case scenario. But there is a danger to this. If the prior probability distribution, again, the beliefs formed from your past experiences and memories, is skewed because you were not exposed to certain environments or people or whatever, then something terrible can happen. When your brain tries to make the calculations, trying to reach for the best case scenario, the conclusion it will reach will be inaccurate because a major part of that calculation is inaccurate. Those deficiencies in perceptual exposure are implicit biases, and they can prevent you from being able to make logical decisions. Your conclusion for the best case outcome from a situation will be far off from what the actual best case outcome is. Unfortunately, a brain circuit that uses this sort of calculation is one responsible for instinctive, complex motor sequences. Deficiencies in perceptual exposure are extremely dangerous because they can lead to instinctive motor sequences that will harm other people, or instinctive decisions that will traumatize other people. For example, how people restrained Matthew at the scene of the accident when they saw that he was touching his face and not being coherent, or how the Commonwealth attorney assumed that Matthew was trying to harm others or is a severe danger or threat to society and will have a next victim, which was a direct quote. We need to start reframing biases as deficiencies, like vitamin deficiencies or iron deficiencies, because that is truly what they are. Deficiencies that are skewing the function of your neurobiological circuits and preventing you from making good instinctive decisions. In fact, we should be looking at these as far more dangerous than vitamin or iron deficiencies, because while a vitamin B deficiency can affect some immune function, or an iron deficiency can encourage anemia, enough of an implicit bias, enough of a deficiency in perceptual exposure can make you cause lasting trauma in other people's lives, and it can make you kill people. So yeah, that's what I have to say about implicit bias.
Ooh, you just took us to church. Wow. So
Right. No,
how?
Mike had a question from what she just read. He asked, "What is she reading?
He asked what?
What was she reading from?"
Oh, that was her notes she made.
Yeah, I prepared this in advance because I cannot answer things on the spot. So
Okay.
it was something I'd written beforehand.
All right. Cool.
So Arula, I have a question. Are you so we all have this capacity to allow bias, especially from people who don't fit what we think is supposed to happen, what's the most normal, probable thing that will happen. What do we do to stop that? How do we prevent? What needs to happen in order to prevent being a racist jerk who ruins people's lives?
Yes. So luckily, the good thing about thinking of these as deficiencies is, like, just like you can take a vitamin to treat like a vitamin deficiency, or take iron supplements to treat an iron deficiency, for deficiency in perceptual exposure, all you need to do is expose yourself to areas that you're ignorant about, or things that you haven't experienced before. And this way, your prior probability distribution will be more accurate and will allow you to actually make decisions that are closer and closer to what the true best case scenario outcome is for any situation. All you need to do is expose yourself to your areas of ignorance, and make up for those deficiencies in perceptual exposure.
So basically, watching this live feed right now with autistic adults, breaking things down through our experience, will help people to fix a deficiency in their perception, and it will help to erase ableism and racism just from watching this live stream and understanding our mannerisms and behavior and speech and internal thoughts that we are sharing. Right? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, while just watching this live stream won't erase
Right.
the racism that we all have, and the implicit biases that we all have, it's definitely a good step in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. And we're going to upload this. I know that was kind of that was a lot to intake. I'm going to watch this like 8 times probably, just to really, because that was some powerful stuff that I need to internalize. So we'll be putting this on YouTube very shortly, and then putting it on all our social media and website. So we're going to shift gears for a minute, and I promised everyone there's shocking new evidence, and there is. I'm going to share my screen with everyone, and let's see if that works. Hopefully that works. Okay, you can see my screen. We good with that? I am going to show you, I started looking. Oh, wow, it disappeared. That's, of course it did. That's okay because I saved it in my notes.
Tara.
Yes.
Okay, while you're looking it up, I believe Mike has his hand there. He has another question.
Okay.
I'm trying to. I don't know what the hand raise means. He just has his hand up. Two hands.
Okay. So I'm going to show you this. This is from a couple days after Matthew's accident. And this is about, I was looking for these early videos, just trying to, I don't know what I was looking for, but I just felt like I needed to go through them. And this is something else. So I'm just going to play about a minute and a half.
Tara, before you play that, so I just want everybody to know, this, what you're about to see, they have taken it off of Google. So when you Google this,
they took it off their website.
Yeah, they've actually taken it off their website because I was actually looking for it and I couldn't find it anymore. So I'm guessing
they forgot to delete YouTube. Correct. That's why I'm playing it on live stream today. So everybody's going to be able to see this. They can't delete it after we're done with this.
I'm actually friends with him on Facebook.
We can't hear the audio.
Oh, no. Well, that's okay. So I will just forward it to, they said there was a statement, and here it is. And so you can see this, right? Everybody can see. We didn't have this information. And what it says in this, and I'm going to stop screen sharing now and just read it from my typed version because that handwriting is abysmal. It says that the strong evidence is, where did I type that? It's detectives received surveillance footage from businesses, and it shows Matthew Rushin cut across the median and drive into oncoming traffic and hit an expedition. So again, it says that the strong evidence is there to decide whether or not Matthew gets out on bond. And the strong evidence that he was guilty that they used to say he shouldn't be out in public was these videos that they had of Matthew crashing. So Laverne was able to do a Freedom of Information Act and get that footage. And I published it all on Neuroclassic. It's in an article called Matthew Rushin and the Injustice System.
It's also on my YouTube channel. If you go on Laverne Rushin, all the videos are on YouTube.
Yes, and all of them are on freematthewrushin.com. Mm-hmm. So the 68 minutes of footage of nothing. So you watch that, there's no crash in the video. And I'm wondering, like, okay, so this shows us what? They use this to deny Matthew bond. They use this to give him an attempted murder charge. That's what they took to the magistrate that night, only hours after the accident, to say, hey, this dude tried to kill people with a vehicle. So the Commonwealth attorney, Colin Stolley, and I'm putting his name out there very purposefully because he needs to be accountable for this, responded to my letter by sending another statement to the same news channel. And we were able to pause that and get a transcript of it. And I put that on the website. And I'm going to read a very important sentence from that. He said, while the point of impact was not captured on surveillance camera from nearby businesses, his driving at a high rate of speed leading up to the crash was captured on multiple cameras. Say what?
Yeah.
So they used this to deny Matthew bond. He could have gone to a doctor's appointment. He had 3 scheduled, one that month with his neurologist. That would have exonerated him because he's very clearly experiencing medical conditions that appear to be epilepsy or too much cerebrospinal fluid around the brain. We've had neurologists weigh in. And so I want to just pass the mic to Cheyenne and let you react to that.
Right.
Vern, did you need to say something first?
Can I say something?
Emmanuel, we'll ask questions in a minute.
So okay. Can I say something first? So basically, bottom line is that when they took Matthew to court, that was their weight. Their weight was saying that they had all these videos, and that they had these videos to actually show the crash. Well, you sit there for 68 minutes and you don't see anything. So basically, they lied. The prosecutor lied, and the police officers lied, because it was the police officers he had to submit that to the court and submit that to the magistrator. I believe also, as part of the second-degree attempted murder, they had to present evidence to the magistrator to say, hey, by the way, we have all these videos and that shows the accident. But when you're watching 68 minutes of the accident, of the footage from Walmart, Target, the cross section, you're watching it and you're gonna say, what am I watching? I don't see anything, because you don't see anything. So they lied to the court, and the court then turned around and said, okay, we're going to take your word, police officers, or we're going to take your word, Colin Stolley. And when that video came out on WVEC and they presented all that, and I remember seeing that by, his name is Stephen Randall. He's actually a friend of mine on Facebook. I went back and tried to look for that. And it was after they knew that we had gotten a copy of those videos, it was taken down. It was taken down like immediately. I couldn't even find that anymore. And thank you to Tara that she found it on YouTube. But they lied, and they're immune to that. They're immune to any type of ramifications that we would then have to file for them. They're allowed to go to court and lie. They're allowed to present false information to the magistrate to bring up charges. They're allowed to do this, and it's terrible. It is absolutely terrible that they're allowed to lie. I'm frustrated.
I think we all share your frustration. Yeah, it's infuriating. Cheyenne, you want to weigh in on this? I know you have some big thoughts.
Yes. I'm sorry, am I unmuted? Yeah. So I'm just going to go through some takeaways that I have, give a little rundown of the red flags and thoughts and questions I had as I learned a little more over time. Now I have no legal education and limited knowledge of trial procedures, and some of this may be redundant, but from my knowledge and research, just a rundown of the opinions that stood out based on some of the aspects of the case as I'm understanding them as a Black autistic onlooker. And also, if anyone wishes to correct or answer me at any point, please feel free. So starting off with Matthew's health, Matthew told the police that he was autistic at the scene of the accident, and it's also believed that he may have suffered a seizure which caused the accident. According to the officers, they claim he wasn't making sense, he was incoherent, but also claimed that he gave statements which they then used as solid evidence. My opinion is, from my understanding, The interrogator was the CIT instructor, but not actually CIT, which is the Crisis Intervention Team. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But with that in mind, not only does this further support the need.
You're right.
Not only does this further support the need for CIT response at the scene for one, interaction with a possible suspect with a developmental disorder in duress, and two, interaction with someone they deemed as possibly suicidal. But it also highlights the lack of law enforcement training that leads to legal gray areas and case mismanagement when addressing people with autism and related disorders and comorbids. This especially is a red light for those of us who are autistic, who are all too familiar with our shutdown and impaired communication responses in high stress situations. Now, continuing from that, the prosecutors were aware of his medical appointments. Even if they weren't aware of his autism at the time, they were aware of his health maintenance requirements, which to me should have prompted further questioning. So in my opinion, the argument that they were not aware of his condition is null and void, personally, not to mention that his own lawyer discouraged Laverne to conceal his autism. So some of the red flags that stood out to me was during his arrest, there was no disclosure for the reason of his detainment, which is violation of his Fourth Amendment rights, which pertains to probable cause and reasonable suspicion. Despite verbal evidence, the officer has no right to determine suicide as an intent. If a subject is believed to be in distress, the guidelines require CIT response. There was no CIT response on grounds of mental illness or anything else. You have the confession of the officers who were there, as well as their relaying to other officers at the time. Then you have the fifth officer, the interrogator, who was a CIT instructor, who still did not follow protocol. So that brings up the question for me is, why, if he was still showing signs of duress or not making sense, or however they put it, to the point that you had to restrain him, why would you allow him to refuse treatment? Does this not present a liability issue? And if the use of restraints is legal to use on someone who is making involuntary movements, doesn't that provide even further support for the need for CIT and or medical response or further investigation? So not to mention that Matthew has addressed at some points in his altercation as moments when he came to suggesting that he wasn't entirely sure what the fuck was going on, excuse my language. I think Tara mentioned in an article somewhere that prosecutors claimed Matthew was trying to cover up his guilt and that they only took his initial suicide statements as solid proof, but they still neglected to include statements pertaining to the first incident that even led to the whole altercation. So why was none of this addressed by anyone at any point in time? When it comes to bail, the prosecutors fabricated additional video evidence as support to deny bail, which then had repercussions on Matthew's health by denying him access to medical appointments due to wrongful detainment. The same prosecutor later goes into the media and addresses Tara's Neuroclassics posting by disclosing that there was no actual evidence of the impact. So my question is, where is this imaginary video? And was it required at the time of the bail hearing, or was this just word of mouth? And then that leads me to question, did these bail statements influence the conviction? Which most likely, yes, seeing as the prosecutor used Matthew's assumed suicide intention as the basis of his argument, which was backed by documented evidence containing partially falsified information, as well as witness statements that served as proof of protocol neglect. This in turn influences the conviction, which left him sentenced to 50 years, despite the state's recommendation of 6 years and 4 months. So my observation is, or my opinions, is the Constitution requires prosecutors to turn over any evidence that shows possible incidents or the need for a lesser punishment. It's called the Brady Rule. Thus, the responding officers committed violations of protocols, and the prosecutor Stoley committed both perjury and falsifying information from the moment of his successful argument for denial of bail and throughout the entire trial, which resulted in wrongful conviction by prosecutorial misconduct based on introducing false evidence and making improper arguments and failure to disclose information. If the video wasn't handed over, or if it was mishandled in support of arguments, if Matthew disclosed his conditions and CIT wasn't requested, if Matthew was believed to be suicidal and CIT wasn't requested, if Matthew was incoherent and not given medical attention, but the need to restrain him for violent and involuntary movement seemed necessary, if Matthew was coaxed in his responses, and if those responses were nitpicked for most incriminating evidence while withholding other relevant responses during trial, if medical or mental health attention was not provided following the incident, which could have possibly revealed a seizure, and if his existing disabilities were deliberately ignored in the process, which also makes me question of whether this is not a civil rights issue. Mind you, these thoughts don't even begin to touch on the other issues surrounding the case, such as the bullshit workings behind the plea deal, the interpretation of the interrogation of an autistic person from the perspective of an autistic person, the use of private conversations as evidence, the refusal to let Matthew's father see his son following the incident, the double standard held when it comes to race and convictions, or countless other issues that this brings up. So, I mean, while my heart goes out to the other individuals directly involved in this crash, the more I look into this case, the more red flags just go up. And it's not okay for Matthew in his case, or for, in this situation, or for other Black autistics who are subject to criminal proceedings by a system that doesn't understand them. So, yeah, and rant.
Outstanding. Yes, that's very well put together, and I agree with you 100%, especially when it came down to us having medical appointments for Matthew. Even when every time we went to a bond hearing, we had appointments set up for Matthew, especially the neurologist for the cyst on his pituitary gland, and we were denied. He was denied every single time we motioned for any type of medical help for Matthew. So, yeah.
Yeah. So all of this predicated on imaginary videos that they, Stalian has clapped back to me, to the articles that I put out, and Laverne uploaded the footage that she had. We put all of it out for the world to see. Okay, this is everything. You tell me if he's guilty based on this footage. Nothing is edited, nothing is hidden. And he responds by saying, yeah, we don't have videos of the actual crash, but we have videos that show that he was speeding. Well, look at the videos. Everybody was speeding. You can't pick out one car that's going faster than others because, and they're like tiny white dots of light in the darkness in the far distance. And a lot of those videos do not even point at a road at all. They're pointed directly at storefronts, like people walking in and out of Walmart. That is what they use to prevent Matthew from going to a doctor. That is what they use to give him an attempted murder charge. A video that they claimed, and we showed you the snippet from the actual court documents, that screenshot, which now I will put it out into the world aggressively for everyone to see, that the prosecutor who has refused to return my calls or respond to me, which at this point I'm quite sure he never will, because I've been very aggressive with that, but he hasn't responded to any autistic people, or our allies asking, why did this happen? He puts passive aggressive things, like his open letter to the governor, basically just invalidating us and saying our feelings don't match the facts. Well, look, there's your facts. Is that your handwriting, Colin Stolly? You perjured yourself, your department, perjured yourself, and that is not the only time.
No.
And we will put it all out there. This is so wrong. We're so angry that Matthew is still in there. It should not take that long. It takes 5 minutes to look at this case and realize how wrong everything about it was. We're going to switch gears because we have some other really important topics, and we have just under an hour left. We're going to go till about 11. We understand if people can't, everybody's in different time zones. If you can't stay the whole time, we will be uploading this. And we have some questions waiting that we'll get to soon. We just want to make sure that we can get through everyone. We're going to go back to Arula and some neuroscience again, because science is the great equalizer here. You can't argue with science. So in Matthew's sentencing hearing, they talked about Matthew being on medication at one point for ADHD. And he didn't want to take his meds after his 2017 accident. He was in a coma. He was losing weight to a point that was severe. He had become emaciated. There are pictures that he put on his private social media that we won't share with the public because he's entitled to his privacy, but his bones were showing. He was very thin. He didn't want to take the medication anymore. He didn't take it. For about a year before the accident, he was off the medication. He was employed. He never missed work. He was in school. He had no problems in life. Everyone loved him. He had a girlfriend. He had friends. He was a very happy, well-adjusted person creating art and poetry and music. But in court, they made it seem as if because Matthew refused to take medicines, like the medication he was taking would have prevented him from becoming a sudden homicidal maniac. And he should have known that and taken the meds, and he was negligent in that. And so they, at sentencing, said, you will be on indeterminate supervised probation for no less than 10 years upon your release, and you must comply with all mental health treatment and programs as directed by your probation officer. As directed by a probation officer, that is who is going to control his mental health for the next 10 years or so, including compliance with all medication administration as it is prescribed for you by your mental health or medical providers. And so he's got, upon release, at least a decade of being monitored for taking medications that he is required to be on. And I would like to ask Arula if you can explain, did Matthew stopping ADHD meds cause anything that happened the night of the accident? Should the court have acted as an arbiter of Matthew's mental health and impose this on him? Can you explain some of this to us? You got your mic muted, so you have to unmute.
Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So in court, yeah, Matthew was being painted as medically negligent, but what's not being discussed is the actual neurobiology of ADHD medication, how it works, and like how stopping it a year before the accident would not have anything really. It would be highly, highly unlikely that it would have anything to do with the accident. So basically, ADHD is a brain neurotype that can cause either lack of attention, inattentive type, or hyperactivity and impulsivity, hyperactive type, or both, combination type. And basically your brain is made up of cells called neurons. And the way that neurons communicate with each other is through these things called synapses, which are small gaps between the sending neuron and the receiving neuron. And so basically the sending neuron releases chemicals to the receiving neuron, and this causes the receiving neuron to create an electrical signal, which allows it to release its own chemicals to other neurons, thus permitting a chain reaction or communication. So 2 examples of these chemicals, which are important for understanding ADHD, are dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine is a chemical in your brain that helps with sustained focus and being able to switch between different tasks. Norepinephrine is a chemical in your brain that helps with alertness and attention. Now, both of these are in the same group of chemicals called catecholamines. Now, if the chemical stays in the synapse for too long, the ability of the receiving neuron to send its electrical signal is disrupted. So, the chemicals are either taken back into the sending neuron through proteins called transporters, or they're broken down in the synapse itself with enzymes. But if the chemicals do not stay in the synapse long enough, or if the enzymes work too well, or if they're being sucked back too quickly, the receiving neuron will not be able to send its signal either. If this happens with norepinephrine and or dopamine, it will cause ADHD. In the case of norepinephrine and dopamine, they can be taken back into the sending cell with norepinephrine and dopamine transporters, or because they're in the same group of chemicals, an enzyme called COMT can break both of them down. Now, ADHD is caused when either there is too much COMT breaking down the dopamine and norepinephrine in the synapse too quickly for it to get to the receiving neuron, or it is caused when there's not enough norepinephrine being released, or it is caused when there aren't enough receptors on the receiving neurons to actually receive the dopamine. So now one of the ways that dopamine is released is through movement. So if not enough dopamine is staying in the synapse or activating receptors, a way to cause more dopamine is to move more frequently to counteract this sparsity in the synapse. So some medications will aim to keep dopamine in the synapse longer, so the person doesn't need to move so much anymore in order to get this dopamine to the level that it needs to be at. Medications like Concerta or Ritalin, dopamine transporter blockers, block those transporter proteins I was talking about from being able to function, thus preventing the sending cells from sucking the dopamine out of the synapse, so it will stay in the synapse longer and be able to bind to the receptors on the receiving neuron more, or longer, and the person does not need to move as much anymore to get this to happen. If not enough norepinephrine is in the synapse, this will cause a decrease in attention and alertness, causing inattention. Strattera, also known as atomoxetine, is a norepinephrine transporter blocker that keeps norepinephrine in the synapse longer, so that the patient is able to have calm, focused attention and alertness. Concerta and Strattera, the medications Matthew is taking, have a common side effect of weight loss. Because Matthew experienced the side effect to a severe degree that disrupted his daily life, he decided to stop taking the medication around a year before the car accident. Now, ADHD can cause difficulties in executive function and sustained attention and focus, but it most certainly does not make you a severe danger to the community, which is the exact phrasing used in the Commonwealth Attorney's letter to the Governor of Virginia. The framing of Matthew as dangerous, callous, or malicious, which are all also direct quotes, based on his neurotypes, is incredibly cruel and absolutely unjustified based on the science. Thank you. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Yes, mic drop. I also learned so much about myself just now, because I have severe ADHD and I am on ADHD meds. And also maybe I just need to move more. get my dopamine right. So, yeah, they basically use science to show that they way overstepped their bounds in trying to litigate Matthew's use of medication and his right as an adult to decide what's working for him and work with his doctors to take it or not take it. It was not what caused the accident. It doesn't make you a homicidal maniac. And this ableism, which, you know, we can prove the ableism. Or very effectively just did that. We can't as easily prove the racism, but I feel very safe in saying that if Matthew were white, this wouldn't have happened. And last week we talked about a similar incident where there was much worse behavior and no indication of a seizure from someone who was white and autistic, the same neighborhood, same age, who hit 14 cars driving on the same side of the road with no driver's license and got same lawyer as Matthew. He got 1 year of unsupervised probation. So he didn't even have to check in with the probation officer or anything. He just, you know, don't mess up again for the next year and you're fine. That was the end of it. So we can pretty safely say that racism was involved here too. And Cheyenne did a great job pointing out how his constitutional rights were violated and how the Virginia Beach Protocol failed. I believe that the case to say this was a hate crime is very obvious. I do not believe it's exaggerated at all to say that the totality of all the evidence that we're collecting, the perjury, there's more than what we've said. We don't have time today to unpack it all, but this I believe is a hate crime. Let's move now to something that I cannot believe it didn't hit me until recently, and we're going to have Jules deconstruct this part. In that Commonwealth Attorney Colin Stolly's letter to the governor, he basically gives a commercial for Matthew's lawyers, and he talks about how wonderful and capable they are to absolve himself of any, and the courts of any culpability in mishandling his case, because these lawyers are great and they are private, expensive lawyers with strong records. Like, they were great for other people. But this is what he wrote. Rushin's legal team, Melinda, I believe it's pronounced Glowke, I'm not sure. Golubke, and Larry Slippo are among the most experienced attorneys in the area. Their combined experience in practicing criminal law is almost 80 years. In addition to being extremely competent attorneys, this legal team has a deeper understanding and appreciation for Rushin's autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Mr. Slippo's son is autistic, and Mr. Slippo and his wife have long been community activists for autism. So we should all just shut up now. This is how I read this. Autistic people should all just shut up now because Matthew's lawyer's boss has an autistic son and they're community activists. I sent Jules an article earlier about this adult son who's close in age to Matthew. And Jules, can you break this down a little bit and talk about what is why is this lawyer's boss's son's experience not the same and not qualifying them to understand He said a deeper understanding and appreciation for Rushin's autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Can you break this down for me and talk about the difference between Matthew and this man's son, and also autism activists versus autistic activists?
Absolutely. So their experience does not qualify them to understand Matthew's needs specifically. A common phrase in the autism community is when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Autism is different for each of us, and our support needs are unique. Our so-called spiky profiles means that we can be incredibly skillful in one area and need significant support in another area. That is one of the only universal characteristics of autistic people. The attorneys for Matthew Rushin were privileged white non-autistic parents of a white autistic child who benefited from all of the things that come along with whiteness and wealth, including access to a Medicaid waiver. Matthew is Black, autistic, and his experience as an autistic person is nothing like that of the attorney's child. His family didn't have the same background and social capital for him to live in the same bubble of privilege as that the attorney's child. When the attorney's child experienced difficulty, he was understood to be a disabled child in need of support. And when Matthew experienced difficulty, he was perceived to be willfully defiant. They really erased his disability and demonstrated that they perceived his disability to be a choice, not a need for support. And so during person-centered training, it's a curriculum that would be required for anyone to be considered a competent disability advocate. We learn about the difference between a priority being of the person or for the person. So this is the difference that defines a non-autistic person speaking on behalf of autistic people versus autistic people speaking on behalf of themselves. Most people who are familiar with autism do not have lived experience as an autistic person, and those people frequently shut down autistic people who do speak up for themselves. They might claim, "You don't speak for all autistic people." Meanwhile, they don't speak for any autistic people because they are not themselves autistic. There adds another layer when the parents have a non-speaking child, as these attorneys did, who they claim is severely autistic and thus deprive their child of autonomy and agency. And they may scorn autistic people that they deem to be less severely autistic. I hate those words, the severe, mild. It really just discredits the support needs of people and the skills of people. So those aren't words that I choose, but I recognize that that's the kind of language the attorneys used in their article. So non-autistic parents of children they claim to be severely autistic often don't even view those that they deem less severe as disabled at all, and they silence those autistic people who communicate with claims of "you're not like my child." The majority of autistic people don't divide our community like that. We're all equals, and we find the similarities in our lived experiences, and we advocate for those who need support, whatever that support may look like. And I also want to touch on the fact that they didn't define what they meant by being autism activists, I think they claim. A lot of people will show up to an Autism Speaks annual walk and they'll claim that they're activists for the community, and they're certainly not. So I think that is also something that needs to be looked at very carefully, because an autism activist would not have let this happen the way that it did. 50 years is excessive and unreasonable for what happened. And if Matthew wasn't Black, he wouldn't be in the position that he's in. And that's very, very apparent. These privileged white parents who have an autistic child really don't have a place to use that as a defense for incompetent defense of Matthew.
Well put, Jules. Jules, I think that night, two things was working against Matthew. It was the color of his skin and him being autistic. Those were the two, negative factors that just played into this whole 50 years. And, they took advantage of his vulnerability, basically. Which Sean, had mentioned already. It's just the way you're thinking and the way your vulnerability can be taken advantage of in any situation. Yeah. But they're activists. If they were true activists, this would have never happened. So you're absolutely right. I was shocked to see that Colin Stolley even put that in his statement. That was terrible.
It was, Jules, that was amazing. Thank you. You put some things you put things that I've thought in such a clear and coherent way that will help me moving forward to be a better advocate. So thank you so much for that. They have a son who's a non-speaker, and he does some charity work. He loves to get out, and so I believe that he delivers groceries for a charity. And it talks about how they have a tall fence in the articles that are public that anybody can search, the lawyer's name and the word autism, and you'll get several articles that have been published in local papers. And they have tall fences and locks on gates to prevent him from running into the road, because he can't always control himself. That is common for apraxic autistics to elope. It is common for any autistic to elope in a state of extreme distress, or so they at least know that they needed a fence to prevent their child from running into the road, their adult son, not a child, from running into the road. But Matthew was not allowed to make one mistake, because he can make a sandwich. We talked about this last week. He can make a sandwich and do math. But the difference, like Jules said, they are white parents who are lawyers, who are connected politically, who are with their son always when he's in public, protecting him from things like this happening. And when Matthew's father showed up at the accident scene, as soon as he heard, he ran to the scene. Instead of allowing Matthew's family to be with him and advocate for him as an autistic person, they made him stand on the sidewalk in the freezing rain in early January for hours, and didn't even tell him when they had taken Matthew to the precinct bureau. So that shows you, no, they did not have the authority to, they do not have a deeper understanding of autism as it was experienced by Matthew. Their son's and their family's life compared to Matthew's was different in every single way, as different as, my life might be compared to someone who lives in the third world. It's just not the same at all. It's apples and oranges. And to say that is so common in all of, that is what autistic people hear all the time. And we have repeated this. Laverne has said it many times. Matthew needed to, it would have helped him so much had he been given information about being autistic from autistic people, he would have been better prepared to advocate for himself that night. He didn't even know if he was still autistic. He thought he overcame it, and he just had all this self-love. But really what he had was acceptance of his autistic self. He didn't have the right language to express that, or to understand that, you don't overcome autism. We have obstacles, like any people. You non-autistic people have obstacles compared to us. We do a lot of things very easily, and you don't believe us that we can do these things, and so that kind of makes our gifts an obstacle as well. But Laverne needed to know this as a parent. Laverne, the whole world can see how hard Laverne is willing to work for her child. The whole world can see how much Laverne cares about justice, and not just for Matthew. Laverne deserved to have the information that Cheyenne and Jules and Arula and Sean want to put out into the world. That she deserved that, and she didn't know because the autism activists drown us out. No one is an autism activist unless they are amplifying autistic people, and especially amplifying autistic people who are not white, because that is almost always when you have an autistic person on a board of a charity. That's a token person who's a white person who doesn't know the autistic community either, and that's fine. They don't have to, but you need an autistic activist who spends their time interacting with the autistic community and understanding it, and especially Black and Indigenous people of color autistics, because that experience adds layers of complicated oppression and systemic oppression that white autistics can't understand. So that is a thing that all of society is guilty of, that has to change, because we could have helped. After Matthew was arrested that night, we could have helped Matthew to self-advocate. We could have helped the public understand and get behind us. Like Arula said, they need to erase their biases, and they won't do that until they hear from us. And they're not. So we need the world to care. We need the world to listen to Black and Indigenous, to gay, to trans, to all intersections of autistic identity, to understand how exactly we are different. Arula was next, and she took a break. So we're going to take some questions now. But first, do the panelists have anything to add that you know, reactions to anything that you've heard tonight, or thoughts, insights that you've had?
Sure, if no one minds me going first.
Sure, please, go ahead.
Okay, well, first, just to, obviously, full disclosure, as a white guy who is autistic, to hear even any individual try to claim, I know somebody who has autism, I'm related to somebody who has autism, therefore I know about it, is cowardice. It's not just ignorance. It's you're hiding behind somebody else's experience. That you can understand you can watch what that individual is going through with autism, but you don't know what it's like in their head. Even as an autistic individual myself, I don't know exactly what happens with other people on the autism spectrum. I can guess, and honestly, I don't feel comfortable guessing, because who knows the difference between myself and others and the whole spectrum that's out there. To have the audacity to claim that there is a person in my life who has autism, therefore I have the right to speak for all autistic people, is the equivalent of saying something like, I have a black friend, therefore I can't be racist. It makes no sense in my mind. And the fact that a lawyer would come forward with information like that to try to save themselves is something that flat out doesn't compute to me. That's all I really had to say about that. Anybody who wants to speak any further, please feel free.
That was great. Thank you, Sean. That was so well said. I love that you said that it's cowardice. It is. It's exploiting autistic people to say, I can speak on this thing that I'm not educated on, that I haven't experienced, because I don't think that those people deserve to speak for themselves. And you nailed it. Thank you for that. And it's like, it's equivalent to saying, if you have a black friend, you can't be racist. Yes, you can. Absolutely. Just saying that statement means that, yes, you have racism. And so thank you, Sean. You made some great points. Jules, I saw you unmuted. Yeah. Did you have some things? Good.
I do. I just want to pop in and just ask people to not compare racism to ableism. They're completely different beasts. I think it might be more appropriate to compare like a cis het parent trying to speak for their gay child, or men trying to speak for women, but racism is a whole different beast. And I know that in the activist community, we try to shy away from comparing racism to other isms. So that's all I wanted to jump in.
I apologize if my statement came off as ignorant in
okay.
any regard. Again, white guy, I do not understand racism. I shouldn't need you to say that. I apologize. I just flat out apologize. And thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Jules. And thank you, Sean. That's how people need to respond. That is what everybody should say, is thank you for clarifying. I will try to not do that again. And thank you. So, Arula, do you feel ready? Because we have one more topic for you to. Jules, did you have something?
Yeah, public speaking definitely takes a lot of my energy. So would it be okay if I just answered your question briefly instead of giving the presentation?
Sure, of course.
And I can give it next week if that's okay.
Sure, yeah. And if you can't, that's okay too. So we only have one topic left, and it is the potential for did Matthew have a seizure? And we've posted that prior to a seizure, seizures have 4 stages. They don't always get experienced at all 4 stages every time someone has a seizure, but right before the actual seizure, there's what is colloquially called an oral stage, where a person might experience extreme intense panic and confusion, and that explains Matthew freaking out in a way that didn't make sense to him and fleeing after just a minor parking lot bump. And that wasn't like him. That was totally out of character. He never, he had a parking lot bump or two before, and he stayed there. he thought it was the other guy's fault anyway. So his level of extreme anxiety was just not true to character for him. He was bawling and crying, he said. And then he made a U-turn, and he thought coming out of the U-turn, he was in oncoming traffic. He didn't realize he'd traveled 400 feet. And so he also used the phrase, I came to, several times. So indicating that he was out of his senses and then snapped back into them. So yeah, if you want to talk any about seizures at all, or the potential for that, or what they are.
Yeah, so I guess, so there are a few studies that I can go over more next week that show that people who have ADHD are at like a higher risk for seizures, or like non-epileptic seizures as well. Basically what a seizure is that several of the neurons in your brain fire at once, creating a very large spike in overall brain activity. And this leads to like things like, temporary, this can lead to a range of symptoms, from whether it's just like a temporary like lapse in consciousness, or like or something more severe that has like physical symptoms or things like that. It has a wide range. And yeah, that's basically what a seizure is.
So we have some people who we have some neurologists who have looked at. We actually have a video that looks like Matthew had a seizure right there in the interrogation room. He's just pacing and talking to himself and walking, and then he just freezes. And he seems to almost fall at the end of that and like snap out of it, and then just starts pacing again. And so some neurologists and other scientists, medical professionals have looked at that and said, and even sent letters to the governor and said, yeah, this looks like a seizure. If nothing else, it's a neurological event of sorts that Matthew needed medical care, and that's on camera and the world can watch it. And he still has not been to a neurologist. And so that's pretty tragic.
That's really not okay. Especially, he had a traumatic brain injury too, right?
Yes, he has traumatic brain injury.
He refused an MRI scan. Am I getting that right?
Yes, he was scheduled. Finally, they allowed him, after sentencing, they allowed him to get an MRI, which he's supposed to have one every year. And 3 days before that appointment, they transferred him. And to me, that shows a purposeful intent to prevent him from going to a doctor. They transferred him during a pandemic.
Yeah.
That's so reckless and irresponsible, but it's purposeful because they know Laverne tried 1,000,000 times to get him to a neurologist. He's having these headaches every day. He's losing his vision. He's having transient blindness. He needed that appointment. They had to fight so hard to get it, finally get it. They knew how hard they fought for that appointment, and then they transferred him right before. In fact, when we started working on this case and made it public, they pulled Matthew in and said he was being transferred to Buckingham, which was, 5 hours away from you, Laverne? And they were in the largest COVID outbreak. 2 inmates had died that week. And so they were going to transfer him to that prison as soon as we started making this public and making noise. It almost seems like they wanted him to catch COVID They wanted to take him farther away from his family, just for no reason, unannounced. Just, hey, we're pulling you in. They want to transfer you to another prison 5 hours away from your family. So that to me shows an extreme malice. Laverne's connections and some politicians actually helped to stop that transfer, but they were going to transfer him to a prison, to the receiving bay, or pod, which would have had lots of inmates who were currently experiencing COVID. So, and Matthew has asthma and lots of health conditions, a bleeding disorder, that is a big risk with COVID, is bleeding into the lungs. And he has a bleeding disorder, and they were going to transfer him to a prison that had over 100 cases of active COVID. So that's really bad. We have some questions, but does anybody want to say anything? We have about 10 minutes left.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to, because I've been looking at time, and I wanted to respect Karen's time. I misspoke. I also want to say sorry for, I misspoke and said that her name is Katie. Her name is not Katie. Her name is Karen. I apologize, and I appreciate you. Yeah, that was all.
Yes, we will definitely respect Karen's, not Katie's time. Thank you, Raya. We have some questions, and I will get to those right now. Someone asked, was there an advocate? Joey asked, was there an advocate or guardian of informed consent present with him during any of this? No. They were trying very hard to be, but denied. They wouldn't let Matthew call his family. They would, his dad was standing there. They wouldn't let him. There is a question, how does their failure to properly triage Matthew right after the accident affect the case? And has the court acknowledged it at all? No, they haven't acknowledged it, and we're still waiting to see how it affects the case. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, it affects the case in a way that they say this was totally mishandled and he's released. Has the governor's office responded in any way? No, they have not responded. Publicly, we hear from some people sometimes about, hey, I just talked to so-and-so and they're working on it, or maybe we'll have a decision by X number of weeks away.
A lot of people are getting notifications that state a decision will be made by late September. So that's the only response that we have gotten. It's just through word of mouth and through emails that people have actually forwarded over to me, and have spoken to actually the governor's office stating that a decision will be made by September. So what we need to do moving forward, if you don't mind, Tara, what we need to do moving forward is to put pressure on the governor, on his staff, on Kelly Thompson, on the parole board, and letting them know that, if you're making a decision and you have all the information, you have Matthew's medical records, you have a profound amount of support letters from, all across of aspect, neurologists, psychologists, even delegates, senators. What is taking so long? Why do you have to wait until September? You have his medical records that has his diagnoses. Why wait until September? So as I discussed with Culture City, we need to put pressure on them to say, you know, we're shedding light on this. We're exposing you. We're putting it out there. We need a decision. And so that's where I'm asking as a call to action for everyone before we lose too much time. Call to action. We need to all put pressure on the governor and his staff, specifically Kelly Thompson and the parole board. They're the ones that are the decision makers in this after the whole package has been reviewed, which it should be. It's a slam dunk, just like Dominique said, it's a slam dunk. You have all the evidence, make a decision. Bottom line, make a decision. You have his medical record in front of you. Make a decision. That's anybody looking at his medical records. I showed Dominique his medical records, and Dominique said, with all of these diagnoses, if somebody just takes a look at this, and I'll share it, if somebody takes a look at this and looks at this, they automatically know he's innocent. It says seizure. It says discharge diagnoses, seizures, traumatic brain injury. I mean, it goes down. The list is down. So with them just reviewing this alone, it should be easy to make a decision.
It should. I feel like we all are on the same page. Anyone who's read the facts, we're all on the same page. You're right. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
I don't know if you had been in discussion with anybody. I'm just curious if there's already an action on emailing or if there's also phone calls. Yes. I'm just curious on how we can best guide people to follow this call to action.
So I post it every day. I post the same exact thing, just kind of using different pictures of Matthew, different actions. I have Neuroclassic has freematthew.com, who has all the information. I put it out on my Facebook page. The Facebook blog, Free Matthew Rushin blog, has all the information. My IG page has all the information. Tara on Neuroclassic, Twitter, she's so good at that. It's on Twitter. But as far as IG, both Neuroclassic and Free Matthew Rushin has the same exact information every day, all day. On my bio link, actually right now I am actually streaming on IG. So it is on IG on my bio link. My bio link will actually take you to my Facebook page, and that it has all the information. So there's even a sample letter on my Facebook page where the hyperlink takes you. So if you don't know, how to go about just articulating it, there's already a template. Take it, send it.
Okay. That feels like the perfect place to conclude. I want to thank our panelists so much. I want to thank everybody who's out there who's trying. We know that you're trying. We love all the art and the creative things that people are doing. They help so much. You might feel like you don't know what to do, and then you do a drawing or you make a funny video, or just, autistic people are amazingly creative. Just try something. You might have the idea that gets through, and if not for Matthew, for someone else. Conclude with also follow freeoseembrown.com and look, just search Oseen Brown on social media. His family is running social media too, and these two cases are both very close with Neuroclassic. Oseen is he was he's autistic, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for trying to prevent a cell phone robbery. And he has had 2 open heart surgeries. He's Matthew's age. He's had 2 open heart surgeries, and he's now in critical health condition, and he's not getting medical care. So we need also for people to care about Osim Brown. His life matters too. And we have less access in the UK, but there are amazing activists, autistic activists in the UK who are trying really hard. So, social media helps a lot. That's what got this case going. Twitter, that's what got this off the ground. So please just keep doing the things that you're doing. Use your creativity and just try things. It might be the thing that works. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to the panelists for your wisdom. And thank you so much to Raya for your tech genius and your commitment to accessibility and live captions. Thank you, everyone. And we will get this uploaded soon. Oh, yes. Thank you, Kayla. Justice for Soraya,
yes.
Soraya. Laverne, you want to talk about that, and then we'll close the meeting.
Yes.
Raya just shut it down after Laverne's done.
So just quickly, Justice for Soraya, they're out in Oregon. Kelsey Duran is actually leading the cause on that, but Soraya is 14 years old. She is in juvenile detention. She had a meltdown, and I really don't want to go into the whole thing, but she had a meltdown. Police came, took her from the home, and she is now, the judge didn't even bother looking into the fact that, her meltdown would have caused the issues that she was having, but didn't care, sentenced her to 10 years. So she's 14 years now. She's 14-year-old now. And so it would just, so she's going to go to juvie and then adult prison. You can't have that happen. So her petition is online too as well. I have it on my page, and please share it. And I think her petition is almost 500,000 people have already signed it. But they are working hard to bring her home. If not home, to a mental health facility where she can get the care that she needs. That's it. So we stand together. Soraya, Osimi, and Matthew.
Yes, that's community work.
Yes, absolutely.